Good morning, English 149. It's Grant. I hope you had a good break from listening to me yesterday. That Lindsay Ellis video is really great. Any video better than I can make. I'm learning, though, just like you, on being a better multimedia composer. So today I've split the lecture into two. So the first one, I'm going to continue just to review some terms. And in the second one, we're going to go into the reading. You all been doing a great job with the forums. I've really liked your contributions, and be on the lookout. I've been responding to you, especially if you're confused, and trying to kind of guide you to your answer. These things are hard to figure out, and I think our world, as you're going to realize, hasn't really figured them out either. So we have to kind of define these terms for ourselves. So know that you're not going to get it at first, but you will through kind of the readings and the discussions that we'll have. So I posted for the podcast. You're going to see more details at the end of the second video, but there is now a web page on the left-hand menu. And for today, I don't have an activity for you to do because what I talk about in the podcast is I want you to continue to develop, like, what is your interest in fan fiction? Do you want to write fan fiction for this class? Do you want to analyze fan fiction? Whatever route that goes down, I want you to start to either brainstorm ideas or start to look into some fan fictions, okay? That's why I kind of had you in the first couple classes do some exploration. But that's what the podcasts, when I get to them, really do, is they help us talk about your ideas a little more, and so you can kind of fully develop your ideas. So please use the space today to research what you want to kind of get out of this class. And if you don't know yet, that's totally fine. Use today to kind of start to look into things, and especially look into a couple of the left-hand menu archives of fan fiction. The last thing I want to say is thank you for those of you that are looking into the Instagram. I think those posts are really great, so if you haven't checked it out, please do. But y'all are doing so great right now. I'm really proud of you. Keep up the really good work. So another term that we want to talk about is parody. And same author that I talked before about adaptation, Linda Hutcheon, she's interested in the way that parody is used in the postmodern era as a way to kind of comment on itself, right? To realize what it is and to make some sort of comment about the genre it works in, or the source text, or its own text. So there's a self-reflexive nature to it. And that's what she says distinguishes postmodern parodies from something like Dryden here, which would be considered more of a satire, right? I think you've heard those terms before. Satire is like, just blatantly making fun of something without any kind of self-reflexive nature, where parody kind of knows what it is. So a great example would be Spaceballs. Okay, so Spaceballs goes beyond just a satire. It knows that it's parodying Star Wars. It knows that it's ridiculous. And it comments on it. It comments on why it exists, right? And so that's what I want to kind of draw your attention to, is to think about how certain texts either are self-aware or not self-aware, okay? So another concept here is going to be called pastiche, and it's usually contrasted with parody, and where there's this reflexivity, there's this comment, there's this kind of bite, what I've been talking about. So the Jameson thinks most postmodern, he would actually think Spaceballs has no bite. Um, and he would think it's a pastiche. I don't necessarily agree with him. I think Spaceballs comments on fan fiction and Star Wars really well. But he's worried about when, you're just doing a remake, or you're doing like a 50s movie and you're not commenting on the 1950s, or you're not using the 1950s to comment on today. He's really worried about using like nostalgia. So like a reboot for Jameson is 100% a pastiche, or just like a remake where it's just there to make money. It's not really there to comment. And one of the examples I want to give you where this can get a little dangerous is in Starship Troopers. So Starship Troopers is meant to um, parody fascist films and fascism. The novel that it's based on does a really good job at this. But the movie, almost, instead of taking something to the extreme and making fun of it, this movie takes it to the extreme and makes it look sexy, makes fascism look good. And if you didn't know the way that Nazi films were made and certain shots in them, you would completely miss that in this movie. And so the movie attempts to be a good parody of fascism, but ended up not really connecting with the audience, and the audience had no idea that this movie was making fun of fascism. For a lot of people, this movie made fascism look good. So that's the dangerous point in when we're talking about parody and reader intention and author intention. It's tough when the author or the director wants a certain vision but ends up not getting it because they misread their audience. So, a line that you might have come across before is a lie is fiction meant to conceal, fiction is a lie meant to reveal. And that's kind of what I want you to think about when we get to fan fiction, where parody, is something that revels in its own self-reflexivity, and something like pastiche tries to cover that up, right? So, um, does the fan fiction, is it self-aware that it's a fan fiction, or does it really try to conceal the fact that it's a fan fiction and directly interact with the source text and make it seem like it is just a part of the source text and it's not commenting on the source text? um, you could argue that just changing the representation, making characters um, you know LGBTQ, changing scenes, might be a way of just commenting when you compare the two texts. But if the text itself doesn't have any kind of self reflexive nature to it, it's really concealing and not revealing. So that's what I want you to kind of think about. The other thing is, like, where do you locate intention in a story or book or novel, right? Sometimes it's really hard to tell in the story. And so this is where I think, when we get to Jameson, where fan fiction exists is really important, right? Because being on a fan fiction site will automatically frame the text in a particular way. We will already know that it's going to be a fan fiction just based upon its framing device. So the same thing you can do when you look at novels, right? You want to look at the preface, you want to look at the back of the book, you want to look at all those things that frame the text. And that's sometimes where you get intention. Okay? So in many texts, you can, say based on a true story, right? That's a really easy way to say, this is a fiction, but it's based on a true story. So that's going to mean I'm trying to convince you this is real. Just like a fan fiction is trying to convince you that it's just a part of the master narrative, right? So just think about framing. Um, the other way I want to kind of show you is, to make sure that you're close reading. And a lot of you are English majors, and so you do this all the time, but there's quite a few of you that aren't. So I just wanted to review what close reading is. You will also see in the course assignments on the left-hand menu, you will see that I link in your kind of participation a document of how to close read. But I'm going to go over a little of what that looks like now. So when you're close reading, you want to always read things twice. You want to think about what the writer is calling attention to. You want to kind of interact with the text. And I like physical books because then I can circle and highlight words, and I can think about what the author is paying attention to. So this preface from Robinson Crusoe is an example of that. Like, I've tried to highlight interesting words that would lead me to start to think about, like, well, is this supposed to be fiction? Is this supposed to be fact? Where does the author lie, right? Another example of this is Ozymandias. So when you read more, you know more. So Ozymandias, when we get later, is a character in Watchmen. It is a poem by Percy Shelley. It is used over and over again. Once you know this poem, you see it all the time. So that's one way of close reading, is when you read enough, you start to recognize when other texts reference something. Okay? The other thing to think about is point of view, setting, tone, symbol, and themes. And, point of view, right? What is the story being told? If it's being told in first person, that's more intimate. Third person, a little more distant. So make sure that you're looking at, what kind of person is telling you the story, where the story is being told, and what kind of themes is the story dealing with, right? And again, you can do this in books. Even the title page, like I'm showing you in the Alexander Selkirk, who is the true story of what Robinson Crusoe is based off of, right? It has the real, but it has it really small. So it's just gesturing towards a careful reader, but at the same point, it's saying something that's not important to the story, right? So I'm going to continue the lecture in a second video. We're going to really just dive into the fan fiction, that first chapter, a little more, but I thought this video would be helpful for just going over some key terms.